Hello, hello, hello. Welcome back to Defiance Daily, where we learn how to kick fascism's ass. We talk about the bad stuff they're doing, and then we figure out how to defeat these jerks. Welcome. My name is Xander Schultz. I'm the co-founder of Defiance. Usually you're looking at Miles Taylor's pretty face, but he's joining us in just a few minutes here. He's stuck in a green room somewhere being a famous person. So you're stuck with me for the first bit of this, but you're not just stuck with me. You're stuck with Maritza Giorgio, my co-host today. What's up, Maritza?
Hey, yeah, you're stuck with double stuck with us,
Yeah.
Xander.
double stuck. It's a nightmare blunt rotation, as the kids would call it. All right. Well, let's get into the theme of the day. The details on the death of a Mexican tourist last week undermined the Trump admin's talking points. Trump stabs Canada and the American people in the back. Double stab, not good, with new tariffs. And the Iran war is under a microscope as Hegseth goes in front of the committee today. But as we are norming here, gang, we're going to start out the episode with rapid fire Defiance. Maritza, you ready to roll with me on this?
Let's do it.
All right. Number one, election officials from at least 30 states, including Republicans in Georgia, Idaho, and Florida, publicly debunked Trump's latest election claims that his primetime speech. After his primetime speech, Georgia's Republican election director said the state's audit found just one non-citizen registered to vote. Idaho officials said routine voter roll maintenance was falsely portrayed as fraud. And Florida's Republican elections chief flatly rejected Trump's claim that mail ballots are floating aimlessly through the system. If 60-plus court case wasn't enough, losses weren't enough. Now a bunch of Republican leadership is also saying this guy is full of BS.
All right, a Massachusetts doctor convicted for participating in the January 6th attack on the U.S. Capitol has lost his bid to renew his medical license after state regulators ruled his felony conviction made him unfit to continue practicing medicine. Go figure.
Yeah. I saw that right. I wouldn't want those guys working on anything related to my body either. Thank you. Thank you, overseers of the medical institute over there. 3 Iowa teachers have reached a $150,000 settlement after being punished for helping students organize a school drag show. The settlement ends a lawsuit alleging the district violated the teachers' constitutional rights by disciplining them over a student-led event. Yeah, that's all the things to worry about in the country. Drag queen seems to be at the top of their list despite all the evidence.
Yeah, that's definitely number one for sure. Epstein survivors, meanwhile, Xander, talking about things we should be worrying about. They've released an open letter urging Senators John Cornyn and Tom Tillis to vote against Todd Blanche's nomination for Attorney General. This letter comes, of course, after that testimony last week, those hearings, and then at Senator Tom Tillis's direction, the survivors met with Blanche, and they say that he failed to earn their confidence, and they said it seemed like an obligatory meeting. So they are urging, again, Senators Cornyn and Tillis to not advance his nomination.
Let's go, Tom Tillis. Tom Tillis, villain one day, hero the next. It seems like I've got a lot of.
You can do it, Tom.
A lot of yo-yo. Just stick with the hero thing. We like it when you do that. All right. More than 500 veteran journalists and major press freedom organizations are urging the White House Correspondents Association to directly confront President Trump at Friday's rescheduled Correspondents' Dinner. Their letter calls on WHCA to publicly defend journalists, condemn the administration's attack on the press, and vow to resist efforts to undermine the First Amendment. That's pretty reasonable.
Yeah, Mercedes is writing me. I don't know if I'll be there. No, I won't be at the dinner. I'll be in DC Friday. Maybe I will not be at the dinner. Mercedes, I will be in DC. And
apparently you can just sprint past the security if you want to go there.
You know, I prefer to read the news, Xander. I don't really want to be the headline. I don't really want to be the news. Yeah, not for that, especially. And I just I don't want to be tackled. I don't want to be tackled by Secret Service either. Also, last rapid fire headline: a 36-day, 1,000-mile solidarity march from Nashville to Memphis to register 100,000 voters has just launched. Just an incredible effort to get out the vote here. You can find more information at 100 miles to Memphis.com.
Let's go. One for creative organizing. All right. Before we get into the big stories of the day. Obligatory like, share, subscribe. I was told when I say the word subscribe, it lights up on YouTube. The subscribe button lights up. So I'm going to say it a lot. Subscribe, subscribe, subscribe. When you do, you're going to hear from us on how to defeat fascism and build a better future. We are not here to be podcasters. I wasn't even on social media before this. I didn't even know we do a show when I started Defiance with Miles. We are here to win this freaking moment. So please, not only like, share, subscribe, get your friends in here. Get your friends to join the Defiance. We need to build this up. We need a people-led movement to fight back against authoritarianism. Okay, Maritza, you ready for the first story?
Well, I'm not ready, but let's do it because this story is heartbreaking.
Oh man, I'm in such a jovial
I know.
Mood. I'm not quite ready to be let down. Okay,
I
fine.
know. Sorry. Welcome to the year of our Lord 2026.
I should have known it was gonna. The script says let's start in Florida. I should have known it was gonna be a letdown. All right, let's start in Florida because breaking news today from the Miami Herald just completely undercut Trump and DHS argument on ICE enforcement. This morning, the Miami Herald uncovered some pretty significant new details about the Mexican man who was struck and killed after running from federal immigration agents in St. Augustine. His name was Juan Yaro Cornelia Duran, excuse me. And the more we learn about him and the events that day, the more we are seeing how the Trump administration's justifications for these deaths just turned to dust. According to the Miami Herald, Cornelia Duran wasn't undocumented. He was in the United States legally on a valid tourist visa. He was visiting. He'd only been in Florida for 2 days on vacation and already had a return flight booked for that Saturday. Instead, his wife is now having to return to Mexico with his body.
Yeah,
he leaves behind go ahead.
No, I mean, go ahead. I thought you were pausing for me to say something, but yeah.
I'm just pausing because it's horrific. Sorry, it's just a normal human pause after reading something like that. Yeah. He leaves behind a 7-month-old daughter and a 7-year-old son. It's just heartbreaking, senseless, and heartbreaking. Okay, now is when I'm supposed to pause.
Now is when you're supposed to pause. I think we're going to bring Miles too. I think he just showed up.
Oh, Miles Taylor.
So here's
Welcome.
the thing.
We're sad, Miles. Sorry, I brought you in on the lowest moment. It was good fun up until this point.
That's a rough story, that one.
Yeah.
Well, they're all rough, right? Because people are dying. And, this is especially rough because the administration has tried to justify some of what's happening because, they're breaking the law or this or that, which is not a justification for just taking someone's life. But the fact that this man was visiting legally on vacation with his family, and this is why people are afraid to come here right now. And that's not hyperbole. It is not sensationalism. Like, people around the world are saying, I don't think I want to go to the United States right now because this is what's happening to people who are visiting. How many times have we read the headlines about a Canadian woman who's locked up in ICE detention for days or weeks, or the grandmother, or all of these stories? And this young man, doesn't get to go back home with his family. His family has to go on without him. I am so upset about what's happening.
Well, look, here's the other thing with this story that is striking. Responsibility rests at the president's feet. And they've tried really hard to divorce Donald Trump from the deaths at the hands of ICE or people ICE was pursuing. And in classic Trump fashion, he keeps bringing himself back closer to the subject. Here's what I mean by this. The day after this happened, and was within a day of the other killing in Portland, Maine, we saw the Secretary of Homeland Security take the reasonable step that I was surprised to see Mark Wayne Mullen take of saying, we need to pause enforcement at these traffic stops. We need to slow things down. We need to roll out these body cams, and then we can get back to it. We need to put people through training. And guess who saw that at the White House? The president saw that. I don't know if Stephen Miller took it into the Oval Office. And I mean that literally,
Right.
because this has happened to me before, where we announced a reasonable thing at the Department of Homeland Security, a good government thing, the right thing to do. And then Stephen would rush into the Oval, and all of a sudden we're on the phone with Donald Trump on speakerphone, and there's Stephen across the room who's convinced the president to order us to reverse a decision. But in this case, it does appear that something similar happened, because Donald Trump, within 24 hours, reverses Markwayne Mullin's decision and says, no, we're not going to stop these enforcement tactics. We're not slowing down. Basically says nothing is changing. Once again, the team tries to create a little distance between Donald Trump and these deaths, and he pulls it right back in. The responsibility for this lies at his doorstep. These enforcement tactics are because of Donald Trump. They're not far away from him in the field. He is the one demanding that they continue these aggressive operations. He is the one that said last summer that ICE would have the ability to use, in his words, any means necessary to go after people. And in that case, he was responding to protesters, by the way, who vandalized cars. The president's response to vandalizing cars is use whatever means necessary. The same administration that later said under J.D. Vance that these people had absolute immunity. The message, if you are an ICE officer in this country, is you have a license to kill. I don't mean that with any exaggeration. The message from the president of the United States down to these men and women is you have a license to kill. And by the way, if you do, he's going to make sure you don't get in too much trouble for it. We just had news last week that the FBI was told, stand down. Stand down. You don't need to investigate these ICE cases anymore. We're going to have ICE investigate itself when these killings happen. This is unacceptable. And if you're looking for someone to blame, sure, blame the ICE agent. Sure, blame Markwayne Mullin. But ultimately, if you're looking for someone to blame, look at Donald Trump. He is responsible. He's taking responsibility for this, not in the way that you would hope.
And one last note, Miles, and thank you for that. Maritza, you mentioned tourism, so I looked it up while Miles was speaking. Tourism is down 14.1% this year, which is $12.5 billion in economic activity that are down because people are scared to come to a country, Miles, to your point, where officers have a license to kill. All right. I want to keep us rolling here, though. While the right was quick to label Duran as an illegal running from ICE, some devastating details have emerged that show he was just a man scared of unmarked vehicles surrounding him. And how do we know that? Because an eyewitness who watched the whole thing unfold told the Miami Herald even he didn't realize the people chasing Cornelia Duran were ICE agents. He saw unmarked blue SUVs with tinted windows, agents wearing green uniforms, and assumed they were with the St. Johns County Sheriff's Office. It wasn't until later that he learned they were federal immigration agents. The same witness also said he watched Cornelia Duran repeatedly looking back over his shoulder as he ran into traffic before he was struck by a truck. So if someone standing there watching the encounter couldn't immediately identify who these officers were, how exactly was Cornelia Duran supposed to know?
Yeah, and that's what I have been struck by from the very beginning of these operations is, again, if somebody is chasing me down and driving erratically near me or at me, and they're not showing badges, they're not showing identification, they have their faces covered, why, as a woman in this country who's been trained to look out for herself, would I stop? And why would anybody stop if somebody's doing that to you, if they're not showing their proper identification? I mean, this only sets us up. Not only were these legitimate ICE officers, but it also sets us up for bad actors to go and cosplay and harass and intimidate and victimize other people just for the sheer sick fun of it. And so I think this has got to stop. How many times are we going to do this? How many times are we going to be on here talking about something like this?
Miles, your thoughts?
Sorry, I was muted. Look, we've seen this domestically. We've seen state legislators who've had people dressed up as cops, Melissa Hortman, show up at their doorstep to come in and murder them. And that's people dressed up as cops. You see someone who's a plainclothes officer who's meant to disguise themselves, especially if they are in a mask, and You're not going to know what to do. You're not going to know what to believe, especially if you're just visiting this country. It would not be unreasonable to think you were being mugged, that you were being attacked. I mean, I said it on CNN the other week. In my own household, we've had to have the conversation. What do we do if someone flies down our driveway in an unmarked SUV with guns? Am I supposed to assume that that's a federal agent? Or should I assume I need to protect my family because a MAGA lunatic is coming to my house? There are no good answers to that question, by the way. If you think there's some good answer, I'm going to tell you right now, having talked to a lot of folks in law enforcement, there's not a good answer. There's not a good answer other than on the government side, which is they can control the outcome. They can identify themselves. They can act more reasonable. They can control the circumstances. They cannot pretend that they're secret agents running around when they're doing immigration enforcement operations, right? They're not super spies, and they need to. Otherwise, innocent people are going to keep dying. And by the way, there will be accountability for these folks. There will be accountability for these officers who conduct these enforcement operations and use excessive force. It may take time, folks, but don't worry. That statute of limitations clock is not going to run out before there is regime change in this country. And in some places, in some municipalities, there already is consequences. There are prosecutors bringing cases, but that's what strikes me here is until there's a change on the government side, we are going to continue to see episodes like this.
Miles, that's dead on. But I want to play a clip for you that I think makes our point for us. On Sunday, border czar Tom Homan was defending another deadly ICE encounter, this time in Texas. On there, we heard the familiar MAGA talking point. People who die during these operations only have themselves to blame because, in his words, all they had to do was comply. But then Margaret Brennan followed up with a question that gets at exactly what we're talking about here. Take a look.
Be alive today if they simply complied with a vehicle stop by federal law enforcement. Just comply.
Well, the family of the man in Houston said that he thought he was being robbed because it was an unmarked vehicle. Not that it was law enforcement at all.
They had emergency lights. They activate emergency lights, blue and light. You know. In my vehicle, I drive where I'm with my security detail.
You've seen that on video? Because we haven't.
Seen what on video, ma'am?
That there were lights, because in the videos that we've seen, there aren't. And because there weren't body cameras, it is hard to substantiate some of what you were saying.
Okay, well, I have not seen the videos.
Yeah, why would he?
I have not seen the videos. It's only the crisis at the agency you're supposedly co-leading.
And to go on and say that.
Importantly, here's the thing. Tom Homan is in a position to decide whether the White House continues to pursue inquiries into a case like this or doesn't, whether there's the pause that DHS asked for or whether there isn't. And Tom Homan apparently is advising the president on these decisions and making decisions to go forward without even knowing, did they use lights and sirens? Did they actually announce themselves, right? He doesn't know that. There hasn't been an investigation. This goes to the core, and Tom should know this. I worked with Tom for years. He knows better. He's not going to have the answers until there's a legitimate investigation. And if this administration keeps saying, we're going to let ICE investigate itself, guess what? There will be no legitimate investigation. We won't know. And it's unfortunate to see people like Tom sucked into this type of logic or lack of logic inside of the administration. The logic is really just the logic of one. One man says, keep going, keep going, keep going. He's indifferent to the deaths. He's indifferent to the suffering. He just wants to see the quotas met. He just wants to see more arrests. He could care less who's in the handcuffs. He could care less who's in the body bags. That is the president of the United States, folks. I'm telling you, that's the character of the man. He doesn't care. And if you stay too long, it bleeds down to you. And apparently Tom Homan has adopted that same ethic.
Well, and it's either one of two things here. Either he saw the video and he knew there weren't lights, but he's going to play like he didn't see the video because he just lied about it. Or he actually didn't see the video because they don't really care. Either way, it's unacceptable. And again, anybody out there, cars or multiple vehicles surrounding your car like that, who in their right mind would stop and pull over and be like, yeah, I think this looks like a reasonable person I should engage with. This is not normal. And I'm thrilled. I mean, Mark Brennan does a great job at pushing back. But again, this whole thing of, oh, well, if they would have just complied, you know, it reminds me of how many times do we hear that from, I don't know, rapists who say, well, if you would just quit fighting, this would be a lot easier.
Damn.
Or, I mean, how about the Nazis, right? If you would just comply, we won't shoot you in the street, but we'll send you to a camp.
I want to stick with that Nazi point you made before we move on here, and then Miles will toss it to you. If you're an ICE agent, we brought this up early in the year. Trump is trying to get you killed. If you're an ICE agent, his hope is also they die because people are confused. So he gets his reason to escalate. There's a reason he likes this situation where it's vague and no one knows what's going on. He's hoping people protect themselves, thinking it's robbers, so they are killed. Before Hitler had the SS, he had the SA. They were his foot soldiers, but they were untrained and dumb and less organized, and he used them to stir up shit. And then once he had control of the SS and was allowed to use them, he had the SS kill the SA. There was a moment called the Night of Long Knives where he killed all of them. These are dispensable foot soldiers that he's using to create crisis. And it's not just the people that he's trying to kill, it's also these foot soldiers.
Well, I think that if the administration continues down this path, there's going to be no shortage of excuses that they create for escalation. What is going to bring us back to sanity is showing restraint on the other side. And that may not be a satisfying thing to hear, but that's why we got them to leave Minnesota. That's why we've been able to, at turns, curtail this effort, is they want the political opposition in this country to overreact. They want the political opposition to shoot ICE agents and burn cars. It sounds sick to say, but they do, because they're going to use that justification for a crackdown. We need to head to our next story, you guys, and we're going to head north for this next one. I don't know how our neighbors to the north are supposed to negotiate with this administration anymore. And let me tell you why. Yesterday morning, Donald Trump's own ambassador to Canada, a man I used to work with, Pete Hoekstra, former member of Congress, was in Edmonton. He was raising a glass to what he called the U.S.-Canadian friendship, partnership, and success. This was before 10 in the morning, by the way. Great time to raise a glass. Hoekstra gave a big kumbaya speech on how critical the relationship is between the two countries and stressed the need to grow that relationship and stabilize things with one another and all the ways, you guys, that two countries are supposed to be talking and working together on things like AI and nuclear energy and critical minerals. He even acknowledged that Canada and Canadians don't think very highly of the United States right now. An interesting admission from an ambassador to the of the United States, and a revealing one. And then, just hours later, Donald Trump turned around, and as you may have seen in the news, announced he was slapping 50% tariffs on most Canadian goods. So I guess, thanks for the toast, Pete, but another example of the big boss constantly overruling his own people. I want to know what you guys think about this, but this, of course, is ostensibly Donald Trump's retaliation for Canadian wildfires. So, wildfire breaks open and Donald Trump says, we're going to slap 50% tariff on your goods, which, by the way, folks, can I just be really clear about tariffs? Tariff sounds like a boring word to people. It's a tax on goods. It's going to hurt the people in Canada who make goods. It's going to hurt the people in America who buy goods from Canada and get them for cheaper. Tariffs suck for everyone. That is the rule behind tariffs. Donald Trump, as punishment for wildfires, and I'll admit, the air wasn't wonderful here. I'm not blaming my friends in Canada that they had wildfires. We have them all the time here in the United States. He's now making life harder for our friends in the north and harder for single mothers who are buying goods from Canada because they're now going to have to spend more money. This is the Donald Trump solution to any problem. It's personal, it's punitive, it's ego. It has nothing to do with economics. But I don't know, maybe Xander, you've got a different perspective. Maybe you are pro tariffs on Canada for a while.
I am. I was about to get into my rousing pro-tariff on Canada speech, but after your educational seminar right there, I've decided against it. You turned me in that 2 minutes.
There you go. Well, today, Trump defended those tariffs, you guys, by claiming Canada has been very, very tough on us and saying, quote, without us, there's no way they can survive, which is a pretty strange way to talk about a country your own ambassador had just spent the previous morning calling critical to America's national and economic security. But anyway, I digress. It also ignores another inconvenient detail that I was just alluding to. We need Canada too. We need the goods produced in those other places, because in that same appearance, Hoekstra said the United States needs another 3 to 4 million barrels of oil per day over the next decades. His exact words were, quote, "We want oil. We need oil." And these guys, they just sound like bad movie henchmen, don't they? Anyway, I'll keep going. And he said one of the best places in the world to get that oil is Canada. In fact, Hoekstra revealed that Prime Minister Mark Carney had already proposed doubling Canadian oil exports to the United States as part of a possible trade agreement. And here goes Donald Trump. We're going to slap 50% tariffs on Canadian goods. Please, let's make the things more expensive that we're trying to get for cheap from Canada.
Gang, I'm not trying to ask you guys a gotcha question. I know we didn't talk about it beforehand, but like that Supreme Court ruling that ruled all of these illegal, does that not work on a forward basis? Like how is this even possible?
Specific statute. So the statute the administration used to impose those tariffs was struck down by the court. The Trump administration, in this case with Canada, invoked a statute that's actually never been used before. I think it's from the 30s. And so they found
they're good at that.
Yeah, they're good at traversing the arcane history of legislative developments on tariffs and finding ways that they can ratchet up the price for things.
And they're really good at reviving things from the 1930s. Here's the deal. I don't know if you all know this. I worked in local news for a long time, and I became kind of a wildfire nerd. I've reported a ton on wildfires. The fact that this is used as a reason for imposing tariffs is just absolutely insane and ridiculous, because if you live where I live in Montana or anywhere in the West, most of the summer you suffer through some smoke, not from your state. I get smoke from Idaho, Washington, Canada, Utah, you name it. Like it all kind of takes over this whole region, right? And depending on which way the wind is blowing, that's where the smoke settles in. Guess what? If you're surrounded by mountains, it's even worse because it just sits there. Our fire seasons have gotten so extreme and so intense because of multiple factors, including climate change, yes, including poor forest management for centuries, not just the last however many years. And so this is going to happen. And I have embedded with hotshot crews who tell me that this is just the new normal, that these anomalous events are going to happen more and more and more and more because we are not doing anything to address it. And the anomalous events will no longer be anomalous events. And that's why you see 1,000 homes burned to the ground in a concrete suburb of Denver in the middle of winter, because we are not dealing with this. So if we are going to blame Canada for wildfire smoke, how many times has our smoke in Montana or Idaho or Washington drifted up into their country, for one? And for two, this is just absolutely insanity. I just broke my pen because I'm so and I forgot my second point because I'm so flustered.
That was a good one. It's insanity. That's all right. You know, I haven't embedded with hotshot crews, but I did go camping once, and the campsite next to me was mad about smoke, and I thought that was pretty silly. So this is just like really a kind of larger version.
You know, maybe we need to like call those Democrats who controlled the weather and caused the hurricanes or whatever they did, because we need to like control the wind. Yeah, we need to control the wind here, folks. Like this is wild. And this is the whole point. Collectively, globally, we need to work together to deal with this because it's our globe. Climate change affects all of us. And if we don't do something to stop it, we're all going to be living in this smoke when we don't want to be. It's not healthy for you. And you cannot just blame Canada and say, well, this is your fault. Oh, my second point was this. How many times have I seen Canadian wildfire crews down here busting their ass, putting their lives on the line to save our towns, to save our wildland urban interfaces, to save our mountain towns. And this is how we thank them. Like, yeah, okay. There you go. I'm off myself.
Tell us what you really feel.
I love that. We got to clip and share that diatribe. No, I'm right there. Look, I'm right there with you. This is one of those issues where Donald Trump thinks he's an expert. You guys have seen plenty of quotes from the president. He claims that he is an expert on trade. He's an expert on taxes. He's said he's an expert on the Bible. You could just keep going. He says he's an expert on everything. Well, he thinks he's an expert on forests. I remember this with the Carr wildfire back in 2018, CAR, the Carr wildfire in Texas, where Donald Trump said the problem was they weren't cleaning the floors in California. He said the problem was they weren't raking. There was not enough raking. And then he met with the president of Finland. He said they have forest cities and they do raking. And the Finns were kind of like, we have no idea what he's talking about. Which, by the way, a lot of these places these wildfires start are federal lands. They're federally managed. And Donald Trump says the problem is that Democrats in California aren't getting enough rakes out. He's that stupid. It's the same thing with hurricanes. When we would sit there in hurricane briefings and he would like gawk at the poster and say, do hurricanes also, do they always spin that direction? Wow. Incredible. This is like science to a first grader, and he's just national policies on this basis.
I think like with everything, right? Like we talked about, what was it the other day? He said transgender, and it was like a totally separate word that sounded like transgender. Mercedes is telling me to keep going. I'm sorry. Okay. I'm sorry, Mercedes. We'll get back to this later, but there's a lot he doesn't understand. We do need to manage our forests and clean up brush, but you don't rake it. All right.
Well, you can rake. Raking's great in general, but what we don't do to manage forest fires is send thousands of people into the forest to do raking. That doesn't get to the heart of the problem. And of course, Donald Trump and his administration have cut funding for all of the things that help us prevent forest fires in this country at the EPA and the National Forest Service. And I could go on, but in any event, we go on to our third story for the night, and we're going to talk to our guests about some of these stories. We're going to zoom out and we're going to go international. And apologies for being late to you folks today. I was on with our friends on MS Now talking about Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth, who at the moment is testifying before the Senate Appropriations Committee about the war in Iran, about a number of global issues. He is seated next to the chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, who is also responding to questions from senators. So we're going to talk about Iran and related issues, and to cover what has just become a pretty significant blotch on the Trump presidency. But don't take my word for it. I'm going to take you to Fox News. Take theirs.
All right, Steve, thank you very much. And with the midterm elections a little more than 100 days away, the clock is ticking for President Trump to get out of this war before voters head to the polls. It's making a lot of Republicans nervous. It's already, as we know, unpopular. According to the New Washington Post Ipsos polls, 69% of Americans disapprove of the handling of this conflict. Republicans cannot let this become an endless distraction, especially if they want to win in November. Here to
Who's the 30%?
When you're losing Fox News, you're losing the whole MAGA movement. Yeah. Here to unpack that and talk about an array of geopolitical issues today is Jason Pack, the host of the Disorder podcast, a senior analyst at the NATO Foundation, and an associate fellow at the Royal United Service Institute. Jason, welcome to Defiance Daily. It's great to have you with us.
Pleasure to see you again. How are you, Miles?
I am good. Look, I want to ask you about this. You may not have been watching it, but I want to ask you about this hearing that's happening right now with the defense secretary, who a little while ago was met with the same frustration you just heard from Fox News and from his own side of the aisle. Republican Senator John Kennedy from Louisiana really let Pete Hegseth have it. I mean, he got visibly frustrated and said, give us straight answers. You also had a number of other Republicans pressing the defense secretary on how we get out of this situation, because there were a number of comments ruling out massive land invasions, but conversations about continuing the air war. And you had one senator say, so you're basically admitting we're just at a stalemate. We're at a stalemate. I want to get your sense, Jason, of where the broader war stands and how America's allies are currently viewing its position. Because if here in the United States, so many people, including on the Republican side of the aisle, are seeing a stalemate, the assessment's got to be a lot more damning from abroad.
Well, these are all great questions. But to start with the congressional hearing, finally, after a delay of 18 or more months, we see a situation where Congress does its congressional thing, which is deal with appropriations and push back. The Constitution made 3 co-equal branches of government, and it's nice to see that on the question of appropriations, finally, the Congress can say, hey, you know, you said that you were going to end the forever wars and that you're a kind of MAGA isolationist. That's what we voted for. So we want to keep that in track. On the question of how things are abroad, you know, we've hearkened back to a time where America sneezes and the world catches a cold. We have domestic energy supplies in the United States. So even if petrol is at $4 a gallon or $4.50 in the US, that's sustainable for our industries and data centers. But when I'm paying £1.60 per liter, it really is hitting the British economy at the price at the pump, and Europe even more so. So American allies are feeling the pinch and their economies are contracting. So tie that in with the amount that the administration has kept the real costs of the war hidden from the American people. I'm hearing figures like 4 or 5 trillion of global growth that have not been actualized as a result of this war.
Yeah. The other thing I want to ask, and then and Mercedes and Xander, I'll throw to you for some questions, is look, it's just the administration's credibility, Jason. You know, we've seen the Pentagon bob and weave on injuries, on deaths, on the extent of damage in the region. You know, the total tonnage of this, you know, lies and deception told by this administration over the Iran war could stop a team of oxen in its tracks, as they say. But it seems to me that among our friends, we are rapidly losing credibility about what's happening, what the objectives are, and the sort of not forthright attitude of the Pentagon about injuries that they are seeing is yet another example of that. How are America's allies viewing U.S. credibility as this war drags on, the war that was supposed to last only a few weeks and is now entering its 5th month?
Well, U.S. credibility has been harmed during the first Trump administration, which you experienced yourself, but it's already been at a nadir. So the only debate among our NATO allies is, do they kiss ass a la Mark Rutte, or do they stand up in the way that Carney has been trying to do? And the fact is, no one believes when the administration says that the MOU is going to be binding or that the war was about the nuclear program. So I almost think that the floor is so low, it can't get worse. The U.S. could say, you know, there's a fire in this crowded theater, and the NATO allies won't believe it because they've been playing every trick for so long that there's just no way to get buy-in, whether it's about minesweepers in the Gulf or helping to have a new kind of insurance scheme for oil tankers. We've already blown our credibility so much.
Jason, I want to ask you about this. I mean, the story came out in the Times that the Pentagon didn't disclose 3 Iranian attacks in Jordan that happened before the deadly strike on Friday. And then I read over the weekend that there were, they really weren't forthcoming about how many of our troops were actually even injured. And they said they didn't have to share that information, that wasn't required of them. And so at this time, we also should mention too, coming from a journalist, the wiping out of the press corps at the Pentagon and really having no journalists on the ground with our troops or in Iran. And at this time when, yes, there are cameras everywhere and cell phones, but there's so much mistrust and distrust because of AI and social media. Like, how do we know what's happening? And how do we get back to a place where we can trust what we're being told? How do we know what the truth is?
Well, we don't know what the truth is. And it really harkens back to Vietnam. I mean, there is no requirement for the Department of Defense to say how many people have been killed or what their operations are. For a range of strategic reasons, you want to keep the enemy off balance. And when we go back to the 12-day war, they did good cop, bad cop between Witkoff and Netanyahu, and it was very successful. This time, they had tactical successes with strategic failures, right? And of course, they're misleading the American people, but they're also, they're misleading our allies. And this is deliberate. I would argue, though, that it isn't the constitutional requirement to say, the number killed or the nature of our presence at various bases in Jordan or Kuwait. So this is not something that one can demand either from subpoenas or from, investigative journalism, because we've had a series of wars going back to Vietnam and Iraq where similar data has been also withheld.
Jason, I want to ask you about an upcoming trip that raised a lot of eyebrows. FBI Director Kash Patel is reportedly planning a trip to Russia this October, including stops in Moscow and St. Petersburg. According to Politico, his likely host would be the FSB, Federal Security Service, Russia's domestic security service and successor to the KGB.
Great host, by
FBI
the way. Great host. You never have to worry about getting injured because the FSB is watching you the whole time, right? You're not going to get mugged by anyone because you're being spied on during the whole visit.
A lot of slip and falls over in that neck of the woods. Anyways, FBI and DOJ declined to comment, and the purpose of this trip remains unclear. The trip comes as Congress is pushing for tougher sanctions on Russia over Ukraine. Jason, I'm wondering, how unusual is this diplomatically? Is this simply keeping communication channels open, or is there something more significant here?
Yeah, and Jason, can I tack on there? Look, in addition to Kash Patel going over to Russia at a moment where it doesn't seem like we should be giving the Russians anything, where does Putin stand right now in the world order? It seems like in normal times, Putin would be under withering pressure from everyone in the West, given the war in Ukraine. But the fact that America, in a lot of ways, has taken its foot off the gas in pressuring Russia has given Putin maybe different options than he otherwise would have had if the Biden policy had continued.
Well, I think I'm quoting yourself back to you. The Trump administration has made enemies out of all of our traditional allies and tries to kiss the ass of all of our traditional enemies, right? Mm-hmm. And I argue on my Disorder podcast and in my book that this is because they don't have an end state. They don't have an alternative order. And that's the ways in which W. Bush is quite different than Trump, and Putin is quite different than Stalin. Stalin, he had an economic model. He had a vision, whether it was for Cuba or Zaire. No place was too unimportant enough for him to try to order it. Putin and Trump, they don't have an alternative order. If Putin would win tomorrow in Kyiv, he doesn't have a Putinist economics. But to go back to what's going on in Russia, I think it's important to not be too much of a Debbie Downer and to always say, oh, the sky is falling, because that's something that the resistance and the defiance tends to do when looked at things domestically in the US. Here in Europe, we are quite psyched that the Ukrainian drone attacks are really working. They're hitting Russian infrastructure. They have hurt their crude exports. And Putin is on the back foot. He doesn't want to have more conscripts because he's becoming unpopular at home. And the British and European defense efforts have been working. To go back to the question of the Kash Patel visit, it's very bizarre. It's very disordering. I don't think it's that significant because Kash is not a serious player. It's whether he's drunk all the time or not, and, molesting women or not. I can't comment, but he's not a serious player. He's not going to change our relationships with the FSB. Fortunately, the Congress is more standing up. And due to failures of various Trump policies in Iran and the Middle East, I think we are seeing the traditional Republican base moving more towards a Lincoln Project perspective when it comes to Russia, which is the European. We need to fund the Ukrainians. We need to get closer to NATO. So they may want to chip away at that and say, oh, we're going to, cut some deal and we won't sanction this part if you do this. And, please work with Witkoff to get this carve out and buy some of Jared's meme coins. But the reality is that the Congressional Republican Party is filled with people who are against Russia and that they have a Cold War mindset. So I don't think we should be too apocalyptic on that yet.
Well, Jason, I don't know any molestation allegations related to Kash Patel necessarily, but I do know that he loves to fly a private jet to go see his girlfriend at her concerts. He also apparently loves to have a good time when he's out there on the road. I would worry genuinely Genuinely, I would worry about him
Honey trap.
going and doing a
Honey
Russia
trap.
trip. And the Russians, you know this, I know this. The Russians love to go entertain their guests, get them a little sauced, because when you get them a little sauced, you might be able to get some compromise. That may sound like us having a laugh. This
No,
is
I think
what
it's
they've
real.
done for decades.
it's real.
This is what they've done for decades. So, if anything, if I can give Cash one piece of advice, don't take the shot while you're there. Don't take 2 shots while you're there. In fact, just say you're not hitting the sauce while you're there and get back home as fast as possible. Please don't do anything else to embarrass the United States of America. Anyway, just a piece of advice. Jason, can I jump back to Iran really quickly with you and ask you about the taunts from the Iranians? Because, you and I have spoken in the past about exactly that inversion that we talked about, right? Our friends have become our enemies under Trump, and he's made our enemies our friends or been friendly with them. But the other inversion is that we saw in the first term how much foreign leaders used flattery to manipulate Donald Trump, whether they were friends or foes. They really used flattery and played to his ego in ways that we've never had to worry about, at least to this extent, with an American president. In this second term, and I wrote about this this morning in the iPaper over in the UK, in the second term, we have seen foreign adversaries take that playbook to the next level. Yeah, they're using flattery, but they're also using the other side of the coin, the taunting, the schoolyard taunting, to get a rise out of Donald Trump. We have seen this with the Iranians. It's like they're delivering a master class on how to taunt Trump to get what they want. And specifically, I'm talking about the Lego videos they're producing, the memes, the murals depicting his death and the death of his family members. They are deliberately goading him into a forever war. And he seems to be taking the bait. In fact, it seems to be working spectacularly. And I've had folks say to me, well, why would the Iranians do that? Didn't we just offer them this absurd sweetheart deal, hundreds of billions of dollars, to just stop fighting, reopen the strait that was already open, remake the promise on the nuclear program they already made? Why would they turn that down? And I want to get your reaction. My response to folks has been, well, they're turning that down because they have other patrons. The Chinese, maybe, the Russians, maybe, who are saying, no, you don't have to stop the fighting yet. You've got America over a barrel. Look, they're giving you billions to do things you've already done. Keep fighting. We'll have your backs, and you can get an even better deal. Am I wrong in making that assessment? What's the perspective over there?
I agree with what you've said. Of course, the Russians and the Chinese, because they're disorderers, they don't need Iran to win, but they're just happy for America to constantly be involved in conflict. It's like in my domains of Libya or Syria. Yeah, they might have been unhappy that Assad got turfed out, but so long as Syria is a mess and America is, bogged down, that's good enough. So yes, the Russians and Chinese are disorderers and are happy for the war to continue in Iran. But I'll do you one better and say that the very nature of Shia politics and of the way in which you have a regime of Ayatollahs doing ijtihad and waiting for the Mahdi al-Muntadhir to come back is that they don't care about winning the war. So long as they can show their martyrdom credentials and can demonstrate the glorious struggle in the losing and hopeless cause and stand up to the man, they are theologically successful. And even if 80% of the Iranian people hate their guts, they only need to have the 10% who support the IRGC and the other 10% who are sitting on the fence and have some structures and economy from the regime. And therefore, fighting the good fight and losing as they're doing is good enough. And that Trump would have such a misunderstanding of the difference between Venezuela and Maduro and a theocratic Shia regime in Iran shows you that he has not paid any attention to expert advice and has really wandered into a quagmire where he comes up against exactly an Iranian psychology that means that you can never defeat them.
Well, Jason, final question for you. He's certainly not taking expert advice, but let's say that the president stumbled into this podcast right now. Final piece of advice for him. If he wants to reorder the world that he has helped disorder, what's Jason's advice?
Great question. And I do occasionally brief administration officials because I want the world to be a better place rather than just my team to win versus your team to win.
Mhm.
And I'd say, we're not in a great place, but let's work with our NATO allies and make win-win compromises. So, for example, Andy Burnham is in his second day as prime minister here in the UK. And if he says, you know what, I don't love this war that you started, but you want my help in, for example, some demining in the Straits of Hormuz, great, let's have this trade-off. Let's parlay about the question. And I think that he should go back to his NATO allies and say he's willing to make certain compromises. And when it comes to China and Russia, if the Chinese and Russians can be made to not buy Iranian crude if they violate certain rules, wow, that would end the conflict. So if we go back to the JCPOA, it was an arrangement that Russia and China participated in. It was a multilateral framework, and it had snapback sanctions, meaning that any side could say they were violated, and all sides were then bound to do the sanctions. So he should take a page out of the Biden book and the Obama book, which he won't, and work with our adversaries to constrain them into win-win compromises. And this isn't rocket science, but I'm not holding my breath,
And if you too are not holding your breath, you can listen to Jason's show, the Disorder Podcast. You can go to disordershow.com. I think that's right, Jason, is folks can follow the pod there. Please do. They don't hold their breath. They don't hold out hope. They're practical. They're clear-eyed. Dare I say they're realists? I don't want to challenge your foreign policy perspectives and international relations philosophy. Jason Pack, thank you so much for joining us. I hope you'll come back again soon, my friend.
I'd love that. Nice seeing you guys. Be well.
Thanks,
Likewise. We always end the day on an upper, usually it's an upper. Maritza, maybe you want to tell us who is joining the Defiance today and
Sure.
in this country, in this world, who is defying, and maybe that'll put some pep in our step about where things are headed.
Let's see. Let's see if I'm kind of old, you guys, so I don't know if I'm hip enough to do this one. But let's talk about it. Today, folks, our producer has a special form of defiance to introduce to us. Many of you may not have seen it before. As a matter of fact, she chose it because she's willing to bet buku bucks that Xander and Miles did not. And me too, Mercedes. I'm going to say probably me too. I think I'm the oldest of this bunch, which really stinks. I'm just going to say that. The popular trend of mukbangs. Am I saying that right? Is it
That's right. I don't know. Let's just roll through it. We all think so.
Mukbangs.
Mukbangs.
A form of ASMR content meant to give viewers that satisfying audio tingle. It's blown up in the past few years. Audiences either absolutely loving it or absolutely hating it. There's no in between here. However, this trend has recently taken an anti-Trump turn, with creators actually talking about all of their pros and cons of our president during their lunch break. So for our folks joining us through audio today, this one's for you. Let's grab some headphones and take a listen.
I have no
Well,
idea.
I can talk about why I love Donald Trump. Reason number one.
No.
Oh, no.
No.
Oh,
No,
terrible.
I don't like this.
Mercedes is a demon. Mercedes is a demon.
This is mean. Yeah, I don't like this. I no.
She's clockwork oranging us.
Mukbang with me while I talk about Donald Trump. And Trump's comments are so problematic because when we call someone that we don't agree with or we don't necessarily have the same views with enemies from within, that is so crazy.
Oh no.
Let's eat some Budak while I tell you why I like Donald Trump.
No.
Reason one.
Oh.
Oh, why?
Why did you do this?
I'm one of those people who goes absolutely berserk if I hear annoying eating sounds. Like I cannot handle it.
Well,
This is so mean.
I love that Mercedes didn't warn us heading into this.
I was trying to figure out whether they were pro-Trump or not, but I see that these folks, these mukbangers, are basically eating Trump and spitting him out, or like they're making a negative statement on Trump with these awful ASMR sounds. That's basically my takeaway. Yeah, they're eating instead of telling you why they love him. Because
but is it bad eating? Instead of I've decided I'm in. What did Mercedes say? She said either people hate it or love it. I've decided I'm in the hate camp. I'm in the hate camp.
I mean, they're doing
what's it called? Mukbanging.
But I want them to do like. I guess I just want to hear happy ASMR. You know, the kind that's like, hi, and welcome
I thought it was
to the
that.
podcast. And
No, I
thought it was that.
I want to watch
I thought it was
people
like sexy boys.
shaving soap. I don't want to watch this. I don't want to hear people eating. This is my thing. Like so many, my son, my friends' kids, like they're all disgusting. I cannot stand to hear them eating because there's just so much. Oh,
well, so
yeah.
This was especially a trigger for you. I think we should do a whole episode one day where we all just put on our most relaxing voice and we talk about Donald Trump's abuses of power like this. That might be different.
Times like these, I realize what a boring person I am. I don't have any weird, interesting. I don't want to yuck anyone's yums. I just don't have any of these desires.
Mukbang. I learned a new word today. Let's take a couple of questions from defiance.org members. And in the meantime, mukbangers, welcome to the Defiance. I don't understand what you do, but if what you're doing is helping us restore the rule of law, then I like it. Then you slurp your way all the way to freedom. And in the meantime, if you are a Defiant, like little ants, Defiant, if you're a defiance.org member, drop some questions into the chat. We would love to take questions. We've got a couple extra minutes today.
You know what it sounds like? It reminds me of Saturday Night Live with the like public radio, the ladies doing the delicious dish. Am I aging myself here? You guys too young for that?
I remember
We're
that.
definitely older than mukbangs. That's what I learned today.
Maritza makes it sound like she's, 65 or 70.
I feel like it.
This is like we're each a couple years off. Question. Sorry, I lost track. I was
Where are we?
Slurping.
I'll read it. Lori says, I'm hearing they are not going to help the Tate bros in the extradition fight. Thoughts? I so badly want to see these two scumbags get what they deserve. I always ask for a fair justice system. That's always what I'm fighting for. But I have similar desires to see a public flogging of types with these two. But that's not right. Let's get a fair trial.
I think those are the same things, Xander. I think that
maybe
the allegations are so extraordinary that just saying you want justice for these two guys, that'll do the whole trick for the Tate brothers. Just saying, I want justice should take care of the problem here. But look, don't ever put it past Donald Trump to say, at the last minute on all these other issues we talked about today, where he's overruled his lieutenants who occasionally have found their conscience in a dark closet. He may do that in this case and say, no, don't extradite these guys. But I don't know. Maybe there's been developments since we hopped on the air.
Well, I do know that Jim Acosta's team put out something earlier that said that Andrew Tate said that the Trump administration hooked up their release. But this was
originally, right?
Yeah, originally. So why, I don't know why wouldn't they help him again? I don't know. They were meeting with Paolo Zampoli, right? The guy, the whole thing with the Amanda Ungaro and the Epps. Remember, she was gonna like burn it all down on Twitter.
I mean, these guys.
It's all so interconnected. It's all so webby.
It's part of the MO. These guys protect racists, and Tate has 10 million followers, so he has something to gain for protecting this particular rapist. So,
I mean,
don't bank on them not getting out.
Unfortunately, these guys validate every single day why TMZ came to Washington, D.C. just because there's such seedy connections between these folks. I mean, it's telling that there's a paparazzi now in Washington, D.C. and this is one of those reasons. These are the people they hang out with. And I think the lesson there is who you associate with says a lot about your character. That's why I've been trying to distance myself from Xander since we started this
Doesn't work. Mercedes puts me right next to you. Even though you asked for Maritza to be right next to you in the squares, Mercedes puts me right next to you. You can't escape me, Miles.
That's because he keeps calling me Mercedes accidentally.
That's right.
So you're scooting over.
M name. So hard. We've got another question here from Cammie Collins. Did Todd Blanche make it out of committee? He hasn't yet. I believe that we still have the holdouts of Tom Tillis and Senator John Cornyn, who both had demands for Todd Blanche to answer questions in his what you call QFers, questions for the record, after the hearing. And it sounds like a number of Todd Blanche's answers are unlikely to satisfy at least Senator Cornyn, but we will see. I mean, it's really down to those two votes in committee. If Todd Blanche gets out of committee, we anticipate that the full Senate will vote on his nomination next week. But it's not a foregone conclusion. We will see. One of the demands that Senator Cornyn has apparently made is to try to get the administration to confirm that they have walked back Donald Trump's immunity deal. You remember that slush fund, that $1.8 billion or $1.776 billion slush fund? Well, the administration said it was dead. They were no longer going to give cash to criminals, the January 6th insurrectionists, who they were going to give your taxpayer dollars to. But there was a little portion of that announcement, which was, oh, and by the way, as part of this settlement, Donald Trump would no longer be subject to IRS audits for the rest of his life, which is basically a permission slip to never pay taxes again. Because if you can't get audited, the IRS can't punish you for not paying your taxes. And naturally, people want to see the Justice Department say, yeah, that has also been voided. We're not going to do that. Well, apparently in his response in the QFers, the questions for the record, Todd Blanche said, no, that immunity deal is still in effect. So now the ball's in John Cornyn's court. The ball's in Senator Cornyn's court. So you really want to vote for this guy who he was hoping would take the bait and say, you know, we've thrown that piece out too. So you really want to be the senator who got embarrassed out of his primary by Donald Trump and then humiliated into voting for his personal attorney to be attorney general. We're going to see what John Cornyn does. It's going to tell us a lot about whether there's any semblance of courage left in my former party. Final question. I'm going to throw this to Xander. Xander, Bonbon asks, is there a priority list of items being worked on by someone when the blue wave arrives? What happens next when Democrats take power?
Sorry, Miles. I didn't mean to interrupt you there. Who made a priority list were the freaking Americans who constantly are telling us politically what they want. Trump won on a bunch of promises, despite being a god-awful candidate and a liar and a disgusting person. But he said he was going to end forever wars. Hopefully the Democrats embrace that idea. It's very popular. Hopefully it's not just a protest against Trump in the Iran war, but ending forever wars. He said he was going to prioritize American workers by being god-awful to immigrants and slapping tariffs on the world, which Miles earlier convinced me was not a good idea. But how are they going to prioritize American workers? Our middle class has been devoured over the last few decades. Americans have increasingly precarious work situations. Figure out how to do that. End DC corruption, drain the swamp. It's still a good catchphrase. The Democrats should be saying it. We should end corporate corruption.
They are really good at catchphrases. They are good at catchphrases.
They're great. They're great. Nicknames and catchphrases. That's what they do well. And they're right. Millions and millions of Americans want to see the swamp drained. We don't want to see corporations influence how policy is made in this country. And on the electoral side, break up with your billionaire backers. People don't want to be led by essentially puppets of billionaires. We're all sick of it. We don't like it. We don't like the money in politics. So don't pay attention to the man, but pay attention to the message. He ran on a bunch of things. He won on a bunch of things in 2 of the last 3 elections, despite being a POS. And we should learn from his success.
Maritza, you got anything to add? Are you keeping a list? Do you know someone who's keeping a list?
Well, yeah, I think there are a lot of people who have been doing work. Well, I want to believe Glenn Kirshner is doing work in this space. I think he talked about it on our podcast, the podcast I host with John Tester, where, they're kind of like keeping track of things and what needs to be addressed as far as the accountability space. But there are lots of people, I think, you know, I think first and foremost, like, we are hurting economically. People are struggling so terribly right now. So they've got to figure that piece out. But I think, like, you know, at the top of my list, we have to restore the trust and faith in some of these institutions and really show that like it's for we the people. And Xander makes some really good points there about the American people saying this is what we want and this is what we don't want. But also, let's just not forget, like, I would really love to see any kind of justice for the Epstein survivors. Because, like, what are we doing? We cannot quit talking about that.
Well, and we're going to have some announcements on that front next Tuesday. If you did not see our email today, go take a look at defiance.org and see the note that we shared with defiance.org members and subscribers about an announcement next week on the Epstein files. One boring addition I would make to Bonbon's question is I can't speak for the Democratic Party. I'm not a registered Democrat. I'm an independent. But it strikes me that the easiest possible platform when Democrats retake power is a document that has existed for almost 250 years, not quite, and that's the United States Constitution. I say almost 250 because remember, the Constitution was passed some decades after the American Revolution. That document is a very simple consensus document of what needs to be restored. Respect for the First Amendment, the Second Amendment, the Third Amendment, the Fourth Amendment, the Fifth Amendment, right? This administration has veered so far from America's fundamental social compact that you could run an entire campaign, an entire two-term campaign for the presidency by saying, hey, I'm literally just coming in to restore the Constitution. Let's get back to a shared baseline of how we operate this country, how we separate powers between the branches of government. And I think you would have Americans cheering. But one addition, Bonbon, I presume you're also asking about all of these episodes of corruption, all of the abuses of power. And in answer to that question, there are sweeping, systematic efforts to track all of these episodes. We will not forget. Yes, friends like Glenn Kirshner and Kurt Bardella and others are tracking. Yeah, a lot of extraordinary nonprofit groups, Just Security and legal aid groups. But also, we have been in conversations, as we alluded to last week, with folks on using technology to automate some of that tracking. There is going to be no allegation of corruption against this administration that gets forgotten. And mark my words, we will help make sure of that. And we've heard from Defiance.org members like Bonbon an interest in that. And so I think you can expect in the weeks and months to come to see us making investments in that space to help make sure that there are tools out there so that that tracking is systematic, so things don't fall through the cracks, and so that we can offer up that tool to people who retake power down the road. Anyway, just a little preview. That's all the time we have today, friends. I know we went into overtime. It is Tuesday, which means tomorrow is Wednesday, which means we have a weekly mission brief. Tomorrow's going to be a special one. I hope you will join us. We've had a lot of Defiance, members of Defiance.org, ask us to focus inward and focus on how we expand the defiance in this country from this incredible group of thousands across all 50 states and abroad into an even bigger and more powerful movement. So we've got some ways, some little ways, and some big ways tomorrow to talk with you about how to expand the defiance in this country. And you are the star of the show tomorrow. So please join us. We'll take an extra number of questions tomorrow since the focus is on you. And we'll have some special guests, including friend of the program, Ami Fields-Meyer, now a newly minted New York Times bestselling author who we've all gotten to hang out with recently, who's going to talk about the book that they just published, he and his co-author Julia Angwin, On Courage, but also talk about some of the takeaways of successful resistance movements throughout history before we talk about how we're going to grow our defiance in the United States. I hope you will join us. I hope you will also subscribe to Maritza. What's your podcast called? What's that?
Hey.
What's that show?
We are grounded.
Grounded.
Grounded with John Tester and Maritza Giorgio. I will be with the senator in person tomorrow night, so we may jump on and do something. We'll see. We're going to be in DC, Miles. If you want to come join us.
Oh, you guys are going to be in Washington tomorrow.
Yeah.
Oh man, where am I tomorrow? We'll figure that out. We got to get the pods crashing together. We got to get Tester on. We got to get the tractor. We got to bring all these things and make it happen. You'll see Defiance broadcasting from out there in the hinterlands one of these days soon. But do join us tomorrow, folks. We hope to see you on the program. Please do subscribe to Grounded and Maritza and John Tester's podcast, and we'll see you same time as always, 5 p.m. Eastern. In the meantime, folks, stay loud, stay brave, and stay together.